Yo, my name's Nick. I realized I take things way too seriously and move way too quickly, so in the hopes of moving a little slower and thinking about things a little more, I made you a new Lotus Precon. And this is an update to one that I was previously going to upload. I had the video edited, ready to upload, record everything. It was done. It was ready to go. Then I played the deck against a couple of you guys, and it absolutely sucked. And I realized why it sucked, so I had to make a change to it. Here's the new and improved Lotus Precon. I hope you guys like it. So when I first made this deck, it was a Gerard deck who scales off the number of creatures in your graveyard and can sack creatures you control to deal damage equal to their power to each opponent, or drain, whichever. And the idea of the deck was we were going to run as many scalar creatures as possible, those being creatures that get bigger and bigger and bigger over the course of the game, and then utilize Gerard's ability to sack creatures and deal their power to each opponent. The thing is, every time I played Gerard, every opponent was like, oh, it's a graveyard deck, and they kept exiling my graveyard, and they kept focusing me because they thought Gerard was going to get huge and scary, when that wasn't even part of the deck. And then I realized, that's not even part of the deck. I just completely missed out on a part of my commander's ability and was just ignoring it, and was just like, nah, it's fine, we'll just sack big stuff. That's what I mean by not thinking about things very well and just doing them quickly. So I completely scrapped that deck, and we have a brand new deck, also based around scalars, because I really wanted to do the scalar ID, and I think it is much better. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let's talk about it. So our new and improved commander is Grismold the Dreadsower, being 1 a black and a green, trample, 3/3. At the beginning of your end step, each player creates a 1/1 green plant creature token. Whenever a creature token dies, put a 1/1 counter on Grismold the Dreadsower. Well, there we go. We've got a scalar in the command zone. This guy's gonna get bigger and bigger and bigger, and he has evasion, trample, and he has a built-in way to make tokens to trigger his own ability. So just by playing him, we're not missing out on a lot of the deck's theme here, which is good. But let's follow this up with an explanation of how the deck's actually gonna work, starting with the deck's scalars. So we're gonna talk about 2 types of scalars here. One's gonna be just a creature that gets bigger and bigger and bigger over the course of the game. Good old-fashioned scalar. The second is going to be a card or an effect or a permanent that will make our creatures bigger and bigger and bigger over the course of the game. Creatures makes creatures bigger. Slight difference, but those are the 2 categories. We're going to start with the creatures that just get bigger and bigger over the course of a game. The deck runs Scavenging Ooze, being a 1 and a green 2/2, pay 1 green, exile target card from a graveyard. If a creature card was exiled, put a 1/1 counter on this creature and gain 1 life. Nightblade Harvester is 3 and a black for a 2/2. Whenever a land an opponent controls enters, that player loses 1, and you put a 1/1 counter on Nightshade Harvester. Sinkhole Surveyor is 1 and a black for a 1/3 flying that can attack and make a 1/1 or put a 1/1 counter on itself. Putting in double work in this deck, making tokens and doing the whole scaling thing. Love that. Yahenni Undying Partisan is 2 and a black for a 2/2 haste. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a 1/1 counter on Yahenni. Sacrifice another creature. Yahenni gets indestructible until end of turn. Wildwood Mentor might be one of the best cards in the deck, being 2 and a green for a 1/1. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on Wildwood Mentor. And when Wildwood Mentor attacks, another target attacking creature gets +X until end of turn, where X is its power. Wait, so my big giant trampling scaling commander can get another +X thanks to this? Sure. Forgotten Ancient is 3 and a green for a 0/3 that gets a 1/1 counter whenever anyone, and then when it dies, can move its 1/1 counters onto other stuff. Gallagreeters is a 1 and a green 1/1 that whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you can choose one of the following that hasn't been chosen. Either put a 1/1 counter on Gallagreeters, create a tapped treasure token, or you gain 2 life. Avengera Zendikar, while itself not a scalar, is a 7-drop 5/5 that enters and makes a ton of 0/1 plants that then start scaling themselves whenever you play a land. Tromel, Saymor's Butler, is 2 and a green for a 2/3. Other non-token creatures you control enter with an additional 1/1 counter on them. Pay 1, tap it, proliferate X times, where X is the number of non-token creatures you control that entered the battlefield this turn. Yeah, that's getting bonus counters on our scalars. Yes. Proliferating those counters that are on our scalars. Yes. The amount of things you've had enter the battlefield this turn can be upwards of like 2 to 3 in this deck, but just proliferating like once with this thing, having things enter with an additional counter, it's definitely worth it. Something as simple as Saz's Chocobo is really good in this deck, being 1 and a green for a 0/1 landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, put a 1/1 counter on this creature. Even Chicken Nuggets are packing a punch in this deck. Warden of the Grove, 2 and a green 2/2. At the beginning of your end step, put a 1/1 counter on this creature, so it scales. And whenever another non-token creature you control enters, it endures X, where X is the number of counters on this creature, which means it enters with that many additional 1/1 counters, or it enters and makes that big of a token. Either way in this deck, I scrap what I was saying about the Wirewood one. Warden of the Grove is the best card in this deck, hands down. The deck also runs Genova, Ancient Calamity, being 2 a green and a black for a 1/5. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a number of 1/1 counters equal to Genova's power on one target creature. That creature becomes a mutant in addition to its other types, and whenever a mutant you control dies during your turn, you draw cards equal to its power. Absolutely busted. And finally, for the creature scalers, we've got Champion of Lambult, being 1 and 2 green for a 1/1. Whenever a creature ETBs, it gets a 1/1 counter, and creatures with power less than Champion of Lambult's power can't block creatures you control. But like I said, there's 2 types of scalers. There's the creatures, which we just talked about, and there's the other cards that are going to help other creatures scale. So let's talk about those. Eternal Thirst is disgusting. Imagine this thing on Dreadmold. 1 and a black, enchant creature. Enchant creature has lifelink and gets 1/1 and gets a 1/1 counter whenever a creature an opponent controls dies. Oh, so Grismold's getting counters for tokens dying, for creatures dying, has lifelink, has trample now. That's pretty decent. Shouts out to 3 Hoenn for introducing me to Communal Brewing, which goes perfect in this deck. 2 and a green for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, any number of target opponents each draw a card. Put an ingredient counter on Communal Brewing, then put an ingredient counter on it for each opponent who drew a card, potentially making this an enchantment that causes your creatures to enter with 4 additional 1/1 counters. Sure, that's not busted. The deck also runs Sadistic Glee, being 1 black for an enchantment aura. Whenever a creature dies, put a 1/1 counter on enchanted creature. The deck also runs Hardened Scales, being a 1 green enchantment. If 1 or more 1/1 counters would be put on something, put that many +1/+1/+1 counters on that thing. Cursed Wombat gives, again, an additional 1/1 counter whenever we put 1/1 counters on something. Same goes for Winding Constrictor. And Humongous Fungus, otherwise known as Corpsejack Menace, doubles the amount of 1/1 counters we put on stuff. All of which are going to help our scalers scale drastically more. So since our commander likes to dish out tokens, gets bigger when tokens die, it's going to be nice to run a little small package of cards that can give our opponents tokens. Hunted Bone Brew is 2 and a black for a 6/2 menace. When it comes into play, target opponent creates 2 1/1 white dog creature tokens, and when it dies, each opponent loses 3 life, and it has disguise for 1 and a black. Clackbridge Troll is 3 and 2 black for an 8/8 trample haste. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent creates 3/0/1 goats, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, an opponent may sack a creature. If they do, tap Clackbridge Troll, you gain 3 life, and you draw a card. We also run Slaughter Specialist, being a 1 and a black 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent gets a 1/1 human, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a 1/1 counter on Slaughter Specialist. Great scaler, great token engine, perfect card. And finally, Hunted Troll, being 2 and 2 green, 8/4. When it enters the battlefield, put 4 1/1 blue fairy creature tokens into play under an opponent's control, and you can pay 1 green to regenerate Hunted Troll. And since Grismold's going to be giving us tokens as well, we run a small sack outlet package as well to be able to utilize some of those tokens to get effects, as well as buff Grismold in a pinch. The deck runs Woe Strider, being 2 and a black for a 3/2. When it enters, you get a 0/1 goat. You can sacrifice a creature to scry 1. It has escape for 3 and 2 black, and when it escapes with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. We already talked about Yahenni being able to sack creatures to give itself indestructible. Viscera Seer can sack a creature to scry 1, and Umbral Collar Zealot can sack a creature to surveil 1. So we're utilizing our tokens, we're scaling creatures, we're scaling our commander, we're giving our opponents tokens, but what are we going to do when we give our opponents tokens? Or, let's be honest, there are so many ways and so many decks that just make tokens passively nowadays in Magic. Your opponents are probably just going to have a lot of tokens in play anyway. How are we going to deal with those tokens in mass? Well, we run some cards that are actually perfect for Grismold. If we play a card like Gruesome Realization, being 1 and 2 black for a sorcery, choose 1, we can either draw 2 cards and lose 2 life, or creatures your opponents control get -1/-1, meaning they will kill all of the plant tokens Grismold has given out, buffing Grismold for a shit ton, giving us a giant trampler. Same goes for Illness in the Ranks, 1 black, give all creatures -1/-1 until end of turn. Plague Engineer, being a 2 and a black 2/2 with Death Touch that chooses a creature type when it enters and gives all creatures of that type -1/-1, or Massacre Worm, which could straight up end a game in this deck, being 3 and 3 black 6/5, gives all creatures our opponents control -2/-2 when it enters, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, they lose 2 life. Now on top of all of this, we run some Death by 1,000 Cuts cards. These are going to be cards that are dealing damage or draining opponents for creatures dying. Falconwrath Noble, being 3 and a black for a 2/2 flying. Whenever Falconwrath Noble or another creature dies, target player loses 1 and we gain 1. Or something like Bloodseeker, being 1 and a black for a 1/1. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, you may have that player lose 1. Not only pinging them for the tokens we're giving them, but also pinging them for any creature they play. That'll probably help us bring home games, I would guess. We got Mirkwood Bats, which is whenever we create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. And finally, of course, Blood Artist, 1 in a black, 0/1. Whenever Blood Artist or another creature dies, target opponent loses 1, and we gain 1. Now, since our battlefield is going to be made up of giant creatures with 1/1 counters on them and tokens, I think some good sources of protection will be board-wide regeneration, because when you regenerate, the cards don't leave play, meaning our tokens won't fizzle, and we won't lose our 1/1 counters, but instead of dying when we regenerate, it'll just tap the creature and keep it in play. So, perfect interaction with a go tall token type deck. So we run 2 cards that will help us do this. We run Golgari Charm, being a black and a green for an instant. Choose 1. All creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn. Absolutely perfect for this deck. Destroy target enchantment. Sure, why not? Or regenerate each creature you control. Now, you can tell me this card wasn't designed for this deck, but I will not believe you because it is that perfect. The deck also runs Wrap and Vigor, being a 1 and a green. Regenerate each creature you control. Now, outside of the scalers, the Death by 1,000 Cuts, your giant trampling commander, there are some straightforward ways to bring home games, like we talked about. Massacre Worm is going to be one of your best cards in this deck. You build up enough plant tokens, or any opponent builds up enough creatures with 2 or less toughness, and Massacre Worm will straight up take them out. You could also play a Return to the Wild Speaker to give your board a +3/+3 at instant speed, so if you have a very, very good swing with your tokens and your scalers, this could definitely help you bring home a game. Or just play a Engaruk's Wake as a one-sided board wipe all your opponent's creatures, and leave your board full of tokens and scalers open to bash face now. But yeah, for you nerds, here's a look at the card draw, the mana ramp, and the removal, along with the board wipes and the mana base. Here's a look at 3 test hands to see if this is a deck you'd be interested in. And yes, with that, I am trying to make a promise here to take my videos a little bit slower, put a little bit more work into them and a little bit more thought into them, because I realize that I get excited, I move a little quickly, and that doesn't always equate to the best decks or the best product for you guys. So let me know how you like this deck. You can go check out the link for it down below. Oh yeah, and you want to know the price? It came in at $47.16, so a little bit over the 45. Still though, that's probably what you would end up paying for a lot of decks with tax anyway. Like, game stores just game stores be charging random shit. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to show some additional support, you can head over to nixlotus.com to try our Scryfall tool, check out our community submitted decks, or pick up a piece of merch. And if you want to show some additional support, like the names you can see on screen, you can become a YouTube or Patreon member for as low as $1 a month. Gain access to the deck submission form, where I will review your decks on Friday night deck review live stream. So, little incentive there. If you wouldn't mind clicking one of the 2 videos on screen, YouTube thinks you might like them, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.